How is Putin, who, too often again, and this is where Witkoff and Kushner play into his hand as a strongman, as somebody who can, arm wrestle with bears, on his own. I mean, this is quite frankly just laughable if we continue to allow Putin to have such a outsized power personality. We have got to knock him down a few pegs, and then I think you'll start to see, some of the effects of his concern for his own position in power start to play out.
And talks to end the war in Ukraine did appear to grind to a halt today, didn't they? A meeting between US envoy Steve Witkoff and Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky was cancelled after the US delegation returned to Washington from Moscow seemingly empty-handed. The head of NATO, Mark Rutte, said in a statement earlier that Donald Trump is the only individual who could break the deadlock, and the European Commissioner Ursula von der Leyen tabled a proposal to use emergency European Union powers to seize frozen Russian assets to fund the £90 billion reparations loan planned for Ukraine. Let's untangle where we are today with Bret Bruen, who's a president of the Global Situation Room, a former White House Global Engagement Director under President Barack Obama. Bret, thank you for being with us. I think a bit of confusion, if I'm honest, about where we actually are, given that this meeting didn't happen with Zelensky today. The US delegation have returned to the White House. What have we learned? Where are we actually up to?
Well, I got to ask, how many times does Trump and his team get to be embarrassed by Putin? I mean, this is becoming a bit of a, sad story of, the summit in Alaska, the purported summit in Budapest, the number of times that Witkoff and Jared Kushner have gone to Moscow only to find themselves used as, quite frankly, props in Putin's propaganda play.
Do we know that that's definitely happened, though? I mean, if we don't know the content of those negotiations over the last couple of days, then how can we say that for sure?
Well, one, I would say, as a recovering diplomat, you look at signals coming out of these meetings, and Trump is not one to hold back when there's even, a half-baked prospect for peace. And so the fact that we have so little in terms of progress.
We do have Donald Trump saying that he believes that Putin does want to end the war. That's what he said in the last couple of hours. Is that a smoke signal that we can really see?
Well, no, because he said it so many times and he's been proven wrong so many times. And this isn't just in the last year. It's going back to his first term. I think at the end of the day, Trump is badly misplaying it with Putin. We are in a situation now where Putin is, excruciatingly playing with Trump, using Trump in order to just prolong the conflict in Ukraine, to further weaken both the U.S. position, but also Europe's. And this is obviously got to be a major concern for folks in the U.K.
Jared Kushner's role in all of this is very interesting, isn't it, Bret? He's only quite recently sort of joined the US delegation after being heavily involved in negotiations in the Middle East. How do you rate his involvement so far?
Well, look, I mean, Kushner was, and have to give props to him for orchestrating the Abraham Accords. More recently, obviously, played a key role with Netanyahu and the Gaza ceasefire. However, look, it was, and one from just some of the journalist commentary here in the U.S., seeing Witkoff and Kushner sitting across in that, enormously large table from Putin and his team. I mean, they are so badly outmatched when it comes to diplomatic experience, knowledge of how a former KGB veteran, as well as, those who are steeped in the dark arts of the Kremlin's manipulation.
Sure.
All of this makes for, quite frankly, an imbalance that I don't know that Kushner and certainly not Witkoff can overcome.
Okay. I'm going to put you, Bret, on the US negotiating team. What do you do?
The first thing you do, I go back to my time working the Russia portfolio in the Situation Room, you have got to pierce Putin's propaganda. What we are getting right now out of Moscow is just more puffery. And Trump is playing into it. Putin, quite frankly, is in a pretty weak position. He is in a position that we ought to exploit. And it is only in that position. And we saw this, quite frankly, when I was working on Ukraine's first elections back in 2014. If you're able to not play on his terms, but set a more constructive context for these conversations, then Putin is, by his nature, as someone who was brought up in the KGB, going to try and maneuver out of that weak position, and that is when I think we get to a deal.
Okay. Would that misunderstand his position, though, potentially, Bret? I mean, there is an argument to say that actually Russia are quite stable on the battlefield, at the very least stable on the battlefield, and they are certainly able, for now it seems, to weather economic storms at home. I think Putin would potentially disagree with your analysis of the strength of his position, wouldn't he?
I have no doubt that he would disagree with it, but...
but would he be right? Would he be right to say that?
It doesn't change the facts on the ground. And yes, he has been able to withstand and to work around a lot of the sanctions and the economic pressure to this point. However, you did see when Trump started to raise the prospect of more of these secondary sanctions, that begins to change the calculus. The other key piece here, which we have not played, and Trump, is a big fan of breaking the rules. One, I think on this score that he should, is how do I start messaging more directly into Russia that Putin, quite frankly, is exploiting the Russian people, that, the level of corruption, the level of mismanagement in Moscow is such that this, and we've seen it play out in a number of individual incidents, isolated incidents across Russia, that when that's happened, for instance, fires in commercial centers, that has created a whole lot of concern in the Kremlin. We got to do more of that, because that's what's going to actually cause some consternation in the Kremlin.
So hang on, sorry. So you want to penetrate a message into Russia that they are, that Vladimir Putin's leadership is weak. You said that by doing what? Sorry, but in military terms, or in terms of sort of propagating that through media, or what?
Information operations. I mean, this is
so
the same.
How do you do that though in a environment that is so tightly controlled, a media environment so tightly controlled?
And yet the internet remains accessible, and lots of Russians also use VPN and other means of accessing information. The fact of the matter is,
there's almost no corner of the internet, though, Brett, that doesn't describe Vladimir Putin as being the aggressor. That's everywhere, isn't it?
It is, but it doesn't relate to the realities of the Russian people, and that is where I think trying to blow out some of this smoke and break some of these mirrors and reflect back to the Russian people what is happening in Russia. How is this mismanagement? How is the corruption? How is Putin, who, too often again, and this is where Witkoff and Kushner play into his hand as a strongman, as somebody who can, arm wrestle with bears, on his own. I mean, this is quite frankly just laughable if we continue to allow Putin to have such a outsized power personality. We have got to knock him down a few pegs, and then I think you'll start to see, some of the effects of his concern for his own position in power start to play out.
Okay, very interesting, Bret. Lovely having your company. Thank you, Bret Bruen, who is president of the Global Situation Room, a former White House Global Engagement Director under Barack Obama.